Good everyone, in this video today we have a premium review on the Zrinyi I tank destroyer. This little fella is a vehicle that I got out of the ice bucket, the SL pay thing that you could do. Originally, I'd only bought 100 crates at the time and I thought, it's ending in 24 hours, let's get another 50. And by crate number 30 after that, I pulled this thing out and I was very surprised by it. This vehicle is unavailable to be purchased on the marketplace, so the only way you'll be able to get it is when it's brought back via the same sort of thing, so SL crates or whatever, or unless there's an event that brings this thing back. There's no other way to get this vehicle. However, since this video will be releasing probably after the patch drops, the Hungarian tree does have access to a couple of Zrinyis, as far as I know. I think there's one Zrinyi, the one with the big gun. So you can at least get an idea of how this thing will play, so to speak. But obviously, for the most part, we're going to talk about this one. So we'll start out with the armor, which is obviously not a strong suit of tank destroyers like this, because half the time, like this one, it's as flat as a witch's tit. There's no real way of putting it. The armor on this thing is 75mm thick in most of the frontal areas. There is a driver's hatch weak spot, which is only 50, and the gun mantlet area is also only 50mm. There is some overlap on the gun mantlet and the overall front part of the mantlet, but it's nothing too huge. This upper plate here is vulnerable to overpressure, well, not overpressure, the overmatching, I should say, but no one's really going to shoot for this. They're going to shoot for your lower glacis. Now, there is double layer, as you can see here. There's 15mm and 35. So you have a 15mm lower glacis combined with the sloping effect, which doesn't exactly give you a huge amount of protection, as you can see there, but it's something to consider. Coming around to the sides of the vehicle, we do have 15mm up here, but no one's going to shoot that. They're going to shoot the side of the hull, which is mostly 25. There's this little bit of 30 up here, but even then, most of the side is 25. There is a bit, obviously, with the chassis overlap, but that's not really going to help too much. Coming around to the rear, it's 25, and on the top of the casemate, it's 13, with the roof armor being 13mm around most of the vehicle, with a small bit being 25, and then, of course, the vent being 10. So overall, the armor is not really what makes this thing a go-to, so to speak. It does obviously have okay armor for a tank destroyer, but as I said earlier, it's flat as a witch's tit, so it's not exactly going to be something where you can go, oh, I can rely on my armor. You can't really. As you'll see in this gameplay, the second I start getting hit, it does critical damage to the vehicle, and yeah, it's not exactly what you would call survivable. But where it does make up is both in the gun and the mobility. Now, the mobility on paper seems quite bad. If we go over to the engine, it's 260 horsepower at 2200 RPM, propelling the 22-ton tank destroyer towards top speed of a shy under 25 miles per hour. Now, I will say the acceleration is not great, especially on off-road. It is something where we have to go, yeah, this isn't the fastest, and you will have to play around that. But with -8 gun depression, you can put this thing in an early spot pretty well, and the gun is more than enough to crack anything. The transmission, thankfully, is unlike the Stug, so you actually have the same forward and reverse speeds, which is very useful. And trust me, I actually kind of prefer. Well, I've only played a couple of games in this thing, but I still prefer this over a Stug, and that's just my personal opinion. Yes, the Stug has slightly thicker armor with the add-on tracks as well, but to me, this just feels a little bit more maneuverable and feels like I can do a bit more in this than I can a Stug. Now, it wouldn't be me talking about this vehicle if we talk about the tubes on the back. These are, well, pretty much Panzerwerfers. You won't really have a huge amount of use out of these, to put it simply, and I would heavily recommend just firing them off at the start of the match. That's the easiest way I can see you getting actual use out of them. I'm fairly certain there's been people who have been sniped from across the map by these, but it's unlikely to happen, so I would just meme your way and just shoot them at the enemy spawn and hope for the best if you really want to try and get something out of these. Otherwise, just get rid of them. They're not really going to be that useful unless you shoot a tree with a light vehicle near you, and it overpressures them, I guess. There is smoke grenades on the back of the vehicle as well. You get access to 5, but don't expect them to be very useful. I mean, they help if you're reversing, but not going forwards and things like that. So now we need to talk about the star of the show, which is the 75mm gun on this vehicle. Now, the names of the shells might be confusing, same with the name of the actual gun. As far as I can tell, this is pretty much just a copy and paste of the Pak 40 for the Germans, just with a different name. It appears to be a license-produced Pak 40. I've not really looked into this tank too much, but judging by the raw stats and everything, that's pretty much exactly what it is. So you get decent AP qualities, decent explosive charge upon penetration, which you'll see in this gameplay. It's unfortunately a replay due to me not recording at the time. It is, let's just say, a bit of a beast in that regard. Like, the post pen is surprisingly good. And it definitely does do work against Germany. This is a very consistent vehicle against Germany from what I've seen. Against Russian vehicles, it's also pretty strong. But you've got to watch out for KV-1Es, which can be a bit of a trouble. Otherwise, you're not really going to meet anything that really can't be cracked by this gun. And it's really just down to the way you shoot it, really. One thing I would recommend is carrying a few high explosive rounds. You do see me use one in the replay. I used one on an Istavark, because the heat is nice and all, like having the extra penetration to overpressure light vehicles that might survive a HE. Keyword there. But to me, the muzzle velocity trade-off is just, like, well, fair enough, it's the same velocity, but, like, heat is a bit more... It's not as nice to use, in my personal opinion. I personally prefer the high explosive. Whilst it does have high explosive filler, it's just... I don't trust heat, because sometimes HE itself can go through, like, fences and stuff without detonating. Heat doesn't, and I just personally have better experience with HE rounds. That's why I'd personally recommend it. But overall, if you can get your hands on this vehicle, I think you're going to enjoy it, but obviously just bear in mind it's not a heavily armoured tank destroyer. It is something that you have to consider. And of course, when it comes to dealing with other enemy tanks, you've got a pretty comparable reload rate on a decent crew to most of them, so you should be pretty fine in that regard. Anyway, I'm going to jump us to the replay, a little bit further ahead than where you might expect, because it took a while for the match to get going, and I'll see you all shortly. And welcome to the match. I've jumped ahead almost 5 minutes, because nothing really interesting happened at the start. But at this moment, a Sav is about to drive onto the cap of Charlie. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to kill this vehicle, because I just don't get the chance to, and plus I'm a bit hesitant, because obviously I'm still getting used to the vehicle at this time. And obviously I'm keeping an eye out around me and everything, just trying to not get shot by anything. So of course, as I mentioned, I've already fired off the tubes. Like I said, you're not really going to have a huge amount of use for them. They're more of there as a meme sort of vehicle. So unbeknownst to me, he was actually in the low ground in Charlie. I thought he was in the smoke somewhere, but I didn't want to take the shot to alert him. And that's when, of course, I'm moving in and thinking, well, where the hell is he? And it turns out he's pretty much directly in front of me, just under that ridge. But I was obviously being quite hesitant because I wasn't sure where he was. But as soon as I'm about to push in and kill him, a teammate in an M4 takes him out. Quite unfortunate, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. Plus, it gives me more points towards capping, and, well, I don't have the highest in Italy right now. Like, I don't really play much of Italy at the minute. That's not because of the tech tree or anything, it's just I don't play much of Italy. If I'm going to play Italy, I play the planes, not the tanks. But hopefully when the Hungarian tree comes out, they've fixed the issues with the Tehran 3 that I've seen, because I'm very eager to get my hands on that tank. But even so. So now that we've got the cap, we can hopefully do some work, but obviously I'm trying to use this vehicle's gun depression and trying to keep it in a position where I can obviously use its mobility and stuff like that. I backed up there because I wasn't sure if the 111 was going to drop some bombs. But over there to the left, you'll see a T-34. But first of all, we have to deal with him, which, the post pen, pretty strong. First kill. Now, that LA-5 that you can hear shooting there, he's actually going to provide some very useful casts. Because, obviously, I'm guarding Charlie at the minute, because it's only really me that's actually guarding this cab. And obviously, I'm trying to keep an eye out around, because I know I'm the only person here, so I kind of have to keep my head on the swivel. But obviously, I can't look everywhere, and that's when I hear commotion to my left. And that's when the T-34 gets spotted by the LA-5. And there we go. The Selenium driver's hatch is no longer a thing. So straight through the driver's hatch. And there goes that T-34. T-34s are quite easy to deal with in this thing. It's mainly things like the T-34E that you need to watch out for is really going to be a problem child for this. Because obviously the Pack-4 is a great gun, but it can't crack a T-34E through the front plate. You have to aim either for the turret, which is to guarantee penetration, or you have to go for the driver's hatch, which can be a bit tricky, but obviously that is up-armoured, so bear that in mind. But there is a few spots on that driver's hatch you can actually pen. Otherwise, lower glacis, where the upper glacis and the lower glacis meet, is probably going to be your best bet. So right now I hear this Panzer IV and I'm thinking, is he going to come around the left or is he going to come around the right? At first I thought it was the right, but as he started moving forward, I realised he was coming from the left. So I shoot his gearbox because I know what this jammy sod's going to try and do. Load a second shell, and boom goes the dynamite. Kill number 3. I must admit, it feels satisfying blowing up a Panzer IV with what is basically a German gun, so it's very satisfying because German players annoy me half the time. I'm going to be brutally honest. Just the way they play and like the mannerisms and things like that. Like, at least for USA players, you can teach them. There's no teaching a German player. Sherman there didn't really have a great shot on him, but managed to hit the ammunition rack. Mr. Emir Spaha, you're going to see him later. He's pretty pissed off at me. Let's put it that way. I looked at his player card during the match. Viomirsky, for some reason, decides to try and strafe me. I'm not sure if he thought I had rockets in the tubes, which I do at the minute, because obviously I was sat on the cap. But shot him in the face with the 75mm and got myself an air kill, which is pretty nice. But obviously I'm keeping an eye out around me still. I fire off the 2 remaining rockets, which were in the tubes from the cap, because, let's be real, I'm not going to hit that Achilles with it. And I start moving again to try and get a better position and hopefully find something to kill, because, well, tank destroyers kind of need to do their job. Unbeknownst to me, though, that Achilles over to the left is going to be causing problems, but don't worry, a teammate's soon to deal with that. And there's Mr. Emir Spaha, who we're going to see again in a short amount of time, and it also proves that he plays with his brain turned off, as you'll see shortly. Which I think was quite funny, because you'd think a guy with that many matches played, because he seems quite an experienced player, that's the thing. Like, he seems relatively experienced, but like, it's simple things, like, he's in a stationary position, he's just killed the Chaffee to the right of me, he can hear me moving, but instead, he goes ahead and sits, like, in a rock and doesn't hear me. So like right now I'm listening for him because I think he's coming around my rear. And I'm thinking, okay, I can get cheeky and, you know, potentially get a rear shot on him because he might be in a Panzer IV-J, which ironically is what he's in, but still. But no, he decides to sit in a rock because he's afraid of all the planes. He looks to my left his left for a brief second, but doesn't even clock me, doesn't hear me, and after a bit of torque from the engine, we get a shot straight into the turret. He then for some reason decides to maneuver his hull towards me, making it a lot easier for me to get my shot, and there goes him. And this is where I'm loading a HE, because obviously I heard the Istavark, and there goes the Istavark. And that is going to be, I believe, the final kill for this match. Because it doesn't go well from this point on. I go back to the AP because, well, I'm not going to kill a Panzer IV with HE unless hit like the roof or something, but the chances of doing that are extremely slim. So what I thought was a Sherman at the time is actually that Achilles from earlier on that obviously I mentioned in the commentary here. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was a Sherman, like a M4A3, so I was quite nervous about moving up because I know how dangerous they can be. Like, yeah, I can crack him like an egg, but that's not the point. And this is where we're going to get quite unlucky with the old gun here. We get quite unlucky, and it's kind of my own fault. So that was my fault, not the gun. And once again, not the gun's fault, that was mine. There's the first hit of the match that we take, and it's going to be one of two that we actually take. The Achilles dies to artillery there, and I thought I was safe to repair, but no, I was not. And Mr. Emir gets his revenge kill that he was so desperately waiting for. Like I said, it's a bit unusual because he seemed to be quite an experienced player, but I digress. So, overall, I think this tank is actually pretty solid. Like, I've definitely had a lot of use out of it so far, and it's definitely a bit of a change of pace from the Stug. And I'm definitely looking forward to reviewing the tech tree one that's coming in the next patch. Obviously, it will be released by the time this video likely goes out. But I must admit, this is definitely a good starting point, and I'm looking forward to yeeting some people with a big gun, because big gun on this little chassis, I think it's going to be a bit of a terror. Anyway, I'm going to leave you all to it for today. I hope you enjoyed seeing the Zrinyi I in action as part of a premium review, and I'll see you all on the next one.